So HUD Secretary Scott Turner just recently testified in front of the House Appropriations Committee. And let me just say, he got cooked. He was getting called out left and right. He really didn't have any answers. He kept repeating himself over and over. It was embarrassing. And a lot of times, believe it or not, I try to stay neutral as much as I can because even though I have an opinion, I try not to go too far to either side. So I just report the news and try to stick to the facts. But sometimes you have to take a stance. This guy is a joke. All he is a puppet for the administration that he represents. And it's easy to see straight through all of his BS, which is why he was constantly getting called out during his testimony. I honestly would respect him a lot more if he was like, look, this is the direction the administration wants to go in. I'm a team player, so this is what we're proposing. Instead, he talks like he actually believes the BS that's coming out of his mouth, which is what we're about to get into in a second. Because in this video, we're going to go through the highlights of his testimony with the House Appropriations Committee, and you'll also see exactly what they thought about it. So let's get into it. So the Appropriations Committee is responsible for passing appropriation bills that allocate federal funds to government agencies, departments, and organizations on an annual basis. So they'll decide how much each department gets for fiscal year 2026. There's a House of Representatives Appropriations Committee, and there's also a Senate Appropriations Committee, and they work together. So a presidential administration can't just pick and choose how much money they're going to give to each department of the government. That's up to the Appropriations Committee, which is why a little over a month ago, the Director of Office and Management and Budget, Russell Vought, who was also Trump's right-hand man, wrote a letter to the head of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Susan Collins, detailing Trump's recommendations on federal funding for fiscal year 2026. In the letter, Vought explained how the Trump administration wanted to cut HUD funding in half and turn a lot of the federal rental assistance programs into state programs. It would rather provide block grants to state governments to assist them with funding their own SRAPs, which is state rental assistance programs. Now, of course, this was met with a ton of pushback. Housing is such a critical topic, if not the most important topic when it comes to federal funding. People need a place to live, and this country is already in the midst of a homeless and affordability crisis. But the letter didn't really provide information or address how HUD plans on making these changes. So testifying for the House Appropriations Committee was Scott Turner's big opportunity to give a lot more detail on why and how cutting HUD's budget in half makes sense.
HUD's request for new budget authority in fiscal 26 is $33.2 billion. That is a $35.5 billion decrease. Let me say that again. That's not a typo. $35.5 billion decrease from the FY25 enacted.
So off the break, in the opening statements, as Scott Turner is getting introduced to the House Appropriations Committee, it stated that he wants to cut HUD's funding in half. And the chairman has to reiterate, this is not a typo. Let me say this again, because it sounds so ridiculous. Most departments request more money from the Appropriations Committee. Why would you advocate for less money and think it's gonna make things better? It's completely ridiculous. And the committee definitely addressed their concerns.
Secretary Turner, I'm deeply concerned about the deep cuts the administration's budget makes to HUD. These proposed cuts would radically affect HUD's mission and operations. I'm interested in hearing how a $27.6 billion reduction to HUD's rental assistance programs will help HUD serve our nation's most vulnerable. Your proposal is light on details on how the formula for your proposed state rental assistance program will ultimately work.
Because of existing budget constraints, only 1 in 5 families can receive federal rental assistance. Despite these disparate realities, your department's 2026 budget request proposes to cut HUD funding by more than half. This is not only unacceptable, but unrealistic given the dire need to lower the cost of living for Americans.
So as you can see, Scott Turner is being questioned about his proposal of budget cuts. They're voicing their concerns about cutting HUD's budget in half. And now it's his opportunity to explain why and how budget cuts to HUD is the right decision. Even though anybody with half a brain knows that cutting a budget in half isn't gonna make a department more efficient. But anyway, let's see what he had to say.
We cannot keep running the same plays that are causing Americans to lose. It's time to run new plays and get a new playbook. And this budget, the president's fiscal year 2026, is indeed that new playbook. We've seen that pouring money into programs just fuels its existing status, which is not good. No, here we are, reversing course to be efficient and effective, not bloated and bureaucratic. Status quo is not good enough. And the way that we've been going about serving the American people from a HUD perspective is no longer good enough. And so with this new paradigm, it is indeed a paradigm shift. It's a culture shift. The goal here is not to serve less Americans. The goal here is to serve Americans better. And when you look at HUD, HUD has had record funding over the past few years. In the last 8 years, HUD's budget went from $42 billion to $77 billion, and yet HUD lost focus of its most basic mission. We are only able currently to serve 1 out of 4 eligible families at HUD, and that's unacceptable when you have a $70 to $77 billion budget. And so this is a paradigm shift.
So Scott Turner is saying a bunch of nothing. He's not giving any specific details about how budget cuts are going to help HUD or details about their plan to transition to state rental assistance programs. All he is saying is that what has been being done at HUD has not been working. That's it. He's using a bunch of fancy words, a bunch of useless jargon that's not providing any real information. And I'm glad he got called out on it.
I don't know if you really believe all this stuff or you're just parroting what you're told to say, because let me begin. I wrote reports on this that were detailed about how to streamline and consolidate government, make it more effective. Not because I hate it, because it's so important and the resources are scarce. But there's absolutely no details. So when you just say refocus and reform, it falls on deaf ears. It doesn't mean anything. You can talk about compassion, but no reform measures are going to be able to allow us to cut HUD by 50% and not have our most vulnerable people, seniors, kids, people with HIV/AIDS on the street. And Mr. Secretary, you have to understand housing is everything. Housing for people with HOPWA is health care. These people will die. There's no way you can believe that a 50% cut won't mean a dramatic increase in people being put on the street. So if you just want to say we got to cut these things because that's our plan, I'd respect you a lot more than telling us that you care about people as you put them on the street. What's the detailed plan that says those folks aren't going to go on the street, where they won't get their medication and they'll die?
You've said a lot today. You've not answered one question, but you're consistent. You've not answered the hows of the questions that the Republicans have asked, and you certainly haven't answered how you're going to make something happen on this side either. What I am concerned about is how you could even open your mouth and say that you care about this population or these populations when you're willing to come here and advocate for a 51% reduction in the budget. I am unsure how you and this administration arrived at the decision to cut HUD by 51%. I'm sure you know that these cuts will successfully increase housing instability, and evictions. I'm sure you know that those facing evictions don't have a right to counsel. I am sure you also know that your budget is making massive cuts to legal aid for those facing evictions and homelessness. So I'm sure you know that cutting rental assistance, eliminating fair housing protections, and defunding legal aid will not reduce homelessness and eviction in this country. I am sure you're aware that you are worsening the housing crisis with your budget proposal. If you really believe that you would not slash your agency's budget by over 50%. And by the way, you talk about giving the authority back to the states. You want to give them authority, but you don't want to give them resources. You can't do anything with your rhetoric and your narrative. You got to show with your actions and with your resources. And last but not least, I want you to tell me what DEI contracts you have terminated. What does that mean? Did you terminate contracts to veterans? Did you terminate contracts to disability organizations? Did you terminate contracts to Black contractors? Did you terminate to Latino or Asian or whatever? What the heck are you talking about eliminating DEI contracts in HUD? Who's your population? Who should you be looking after? It is shameful, and you are to be ashamed of being here. You don't have to answer any question because you haven't answered one yet.
And what did Scott Turner have to say? The same old thing. A bunch of meaningless and useless jargon. And they had enough of the BS.
What I was going to say, faith without action is dead. And this is the action that we're going to take.
What?
To do it better.
How?
Because what we've been doing is not working. And I believe
What's
that
plan B?
I believe that you all, your committee, we should have been asking what and how way before today.
I wrote
Because-
those reports. I'm with
Yeah.
you if you have details in
Yes, sir.
how, but all you're doing is cutting, and there's not even a transition period.
So we're going to be more effective and more efficient.
How?
We're not just cutting. It's a new paradigm.
How?
It's a new way to do things.
Let's
Working
come up
the
with more
states.
words than compassion and paradigm. Detailed plans where these folks are going
Yes,
to
sir.
stay in the meantime.
And we look forward to working with you and this staff on those strategies. With record funding, HUD has still not carried out its most basic mission. And I have
Don't
answered
act like
questions.
you haven't been here, sir. Just 4 years ago, you were here.
Ms.
Don't
Watson,
act
Ms.
like
Watson
you
Coleman,
care
if
about
you'll let
this
him, Ms.
population.
Watson Coleman, if you'll let him answer the question,
I
your
don't
time
need,
has
I
expired.
listen, I reclaimed my time back. I yielded my time. You wouldn't let him waste your time, you let him.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And thank you, Ms. Watson Coleman. Thank you for reiterating my point that status quo is not good enough. That also homelessness has gone up in spite of record funding. And
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. If we could move on.
Oh, sure.
At this point, just cut him off. He's not saying anything new. He's wasting everybody's time. Clearly, he's just a puppet for the Trump administration, but they weren't going to let him off the hook that easy. It's time to grill him some more. And sometimes when people are acting stupid, you got to get down on their level and explain things as if they were a kindergartner.
Secretary, I want to ask you some basic questions. Do you consider that there is a homelessness crisis in America?
yes, sir.
Do you think that there is a housing affordability emergency in America?
I do.
Mr. Secretary, is the rent too damn high in Washington, D.C.?
I believe it's high in a lot of places, sir.
So there is a homelessness crisis. There is an affordable housing emergency, and the rent is too damn high in many places across America. And so what does HUD do? What does this administration propose? A 51% cut on basic services for housing. These cuts are severe, and they're going to exacerbate the homeless crisis. They're going to further throw into crisis the affordable housing emergency, and the rent is going to continue to be too damn high. You're cutting 51% of the budget. Housing is an expensive endeavor. It's no longer a cheap endeavor anywhere in America, anywhere in the world. It's a deep pocket issue, and people are sleeping on the street, and you're doing these cuts so that you can give money to people that sleep in mansions, that sleep in Fifth Avenue multi-million-dollar condos, that have lakeside houses and beachfront properties. That's what you're doing. You're not doing God's work. That's not God's work. 51% cut. That's devastating. That's a personal foul, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, and I yield back. I reclaim my time.
Ma'am, can I answer? Can I answer this?
The gentleman has yielded his time.
No, you can't answer. You've been wasting everyone's time and not answering nothing all day. Shut up and listen.
This is the Appropriations Committee. We deal in amounts of money. A program, what is the amount? What's it going to do? How is it going to accomplish that? So far, we can't seem to get any information about budget detail, about what it is that you all are doing. It's a lot of great words, but what are dollars and cents? So I think you just have to keep in mind that we appropriate money based on needs and what the programs are, and then we make a decision as to whether or not we ought to be doing that or not. So please, get us information on the plan, the dollar amount, what you plan to do. Listen, Your budget request, quite honestly, unleashes a catastrophe of evictions, homelessness at an unbelievable scale. 750,000 of Americans experience homelessness on any given night. Cost of housing is out of control. Middle-class families, working families are being suffocated. Folks in this country today work paycheck to paycheck. One emergency or layoff from financial ruin, yet your budget eliminates critical lifelines that help to keep a roof over most people's heads in this nation. Given housing affordability, homelessness crisis facing our seniors who already lived on a fixed income, how are you justifying eliminating dedicated programs that support housing developments with on-site supportive services tailored to seniors' needs?
All right, you were asked one more question, one simple question. Here's your opportunity to answer it with some new information. And I better not hear the words effectively or efficiently.
With this new budget proposal under the president's leadership, this will help us to more effectively serve the most vulnerable.
How?
Effectively serve elderly and
Answer
disabled.
my question.
Yes,
How?
ma'am.
What is the way in which you are going to deal and justify eliminating dedicated programs that support on-site supportive services tailored to seniors' needs? How are you doing that?
Working with the states, ma'am. And when I say working with the states, if I may, states understand their unique needs as it pertains to the elderly, as it
What
pertains
is the
to
program
disabled,
that will address
as it
that? What is the
pertains
amount of
to
money
the most
that is
vulnerable.
going to be required to do this? What portion of it will be federal? What portion will be state? What is the program?
Well, as you said, ma'am, you all are appropriators. You control the purse strings. My job is to maximize the budget that you do give me. And with maximize this budget, we will work with the states to identify, if you will, ma'am,
You
where
can't
those
have a
needs
budget,
are.
with all due respect, you
do.
cannot
Thank
have
you,
a
ma'am.
budget that doesn't have any numbers, that doesn't have any programmatic direction.
Ma'am, you
that
have the
doesn't
budget
tell
in
us
front
what
of
we're
you.
doing. But what is the specific program on seniors? What are you doing? You're eliminating elderly housing, Section 202, which has been in place for years. I worked for a city many years ago, and it was Section 202 in which we worked with providers to do this. You know, my time has run out, but zero programmatic information, zero details on the budget.
This guy is a complete joke. He says a lot of words that don't mean anything. He doesn't specifically answer any questions. He just keeps on repeating himself. And I have an inside source that's been working for HUD for 25 years. And they say that just as idiotic as he seems in his testimony, he's the same way in person. I don't even want to sound mean, but this guy is a joke. There's no way that he's a pastor and claims to care about people. And he's openly admitting that with the budget that HUD has had, only 1 in 4 families were able to be helped. So in other words, that budget wasn't enough. And the only way to resolve this is by cutting the budget in half. That somehow will allow HUD to help more families. It makes no sense whatsoever. But anyway, make sure you guys like and subscribe to stay updated on housing issues in this circus of a country we call home. I'll see you guys in the next video.